I know we've got folks from a variety of different places, not least Germany and the UK. Good to have all of you here. This is the latest installment of the Bath UBI Beacon and the FRIBIS public talk series, in which we bring together scholars and activists from the basic income and sister movement spaces around the world to talk about possibilities for progressive change. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Vincent Liegey. I trust that's how I pronounce your name, Vincent. I thought so. I noticed in reading about your bio that you're from Besançon. The first time I ever went to France, 30 years ago, as a French exchange student, a child, I went to Besançon. So I have a soft spot for that place. And that made me smile when I read that. Vincent is a scholar, an author, an activist working particularly around degrowth and climate justice. And today will be talking to us approximately for about half an hour, I would anticipate. We get very flexible with time about the intersections between basic income, degrowth, and a sustainable and just future in the face of climate change. As ever, feel free to make questions either in the chat or by speaking out loud. And we'll look forward to a decent conversation. Vincent, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Neil. Thanks, Joseph, for contacting me. Thanks, everybody, for organizing this conversation today. I will try to play the game you offered me to play, which is highly challenging, because to introduce a degrowth approach for unconditional basic income in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, it's quite a challenge, but let's do it. And I apologize. I may be superficial and quick on a lot of concepts and ideas, and maybe I will speak already about degrowth without taking the time to define degrowth properly, because just to define degrowth half an hour is very often not enough. But of course, we can come back to any of the things I will be speaking to you in the conversation later. So what I like to share with you today, it's a very quick summary of a book, what we co-authored with the 3 friends in France, I'm getting old, 11 years ago. It was called a degrowth project, un projet de décroissance. And subtitle was Manifesto for Unconditional Autonomy Allowance. And I will define what I put behind these words. So what I will do is, through that book, it's really to reflect on what could be a degrowth project, including a lot of ideas you may find behind unconditional basic income, and also associating unconditional basic income with a large diversity or large set of other type of proposal you may find within the degrowth political agenda. And if you want to explore more everything, so I send you to this book, which is Exploring Degrowth, what I co-authored with Anitra Nelson. It was published in 2020. And this book is really like a summary, critical summary of what is degrowth, where you may find as well some chapters about a political project for degrowth, reflecting on what I will do today on unconditional basic income, and also defining, presenting unconditional autonomy allowance. Starting here, I immediately jump into my presentation, or my short introduction to the topic. I would like to first start with a provocation, and it's something what I've been doing already for 15 years, because the degrowth has always been very close to the, in France, to the unconditional basic income movement. And one of the main criticism, what we've been doing, or we've been addressing to them, which was a very kind and constructive criticism, is that a tool is not enough to make a political project. Let me use a very simple metaphor. When you have to repair your bike, you may need some tools time to time, depending on the problem you may face. So there may be a time when you may need to use a hammer. So a hammer can be a very fantastic tool for certain purposes, but a hammer can also be used to beat somebody else. So there is the question of the political background in which you may introduce unconditional basic income. And when we started to deal with unconditional basic income, we fell down into this trappy debate whether degrowth should be in favor or against basic income. But I think the question is not a binary question, in favor or against, but the question should be, use or not unconditional basic income, to do what in what kind of context. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. So for us, when we started to explore what could be a political project for degrowth within the French degrowth movement, very soon we check what we have already on board, and unconditional basic income is one of that historic old economic social tool, which may be very powerful and which can bring on board a lot of very interesting things toward a degrowth political agenda. Both the main thing, or maybe three of the main things what we liked very much in unconditional basic income. The first one is very obvious, but was maybe not the most interesting for us, even if we always say that the first of degrowth should be degrowth in inequalities. So of course, unconditional basic income can be a very powerful economic tool to not abandon anybody in societies where precarity is rising, where unemployment and social economic exclusion is rising. And when I speak of precarity, is also for the people who don't have a job, but also more and more precarious jobs, where very often these jobs are the most important to make our democracies and societies still survive under the constraints that we know. So of course, fight inequalities. But two more important tools were fundamental in our approach of unconditional basic income. The first one was how to re-empower the people to be active citizens, how to repoliticize society, how to resocialize politics. It's really back to one of the first quotes you may find about the idea of unconditional basic income, what we quote in this old book from already 2013, from Thomas Paine. After the French Revolution in 1792 or 93, Thomas Paine said, "You cannot imagine a functioning democracy if any citizen is not recognized as a citizen and gets unconditionally all the minimum to fulfill his basic needs." And it's something we can observe in our society nowadays. Among the people who are the less voting, you may find the most precarious people, which really question our system. So unconditional basic income could be an interesting tool to re-empower the people, to give back trust to the people, because democracy is working with trust. If you trust everybody within a society, providing unconditionally to all individually the minimums to have a decent life, it's already a signal, a message that you are a citizen who's accepted within the communities. You are a citizen who have also the capabilities, the capacity to participate in the political life. But democracy is not only to participate, to get this recognition and so on. Democracy is also to have the capacity to be autonomous and to choose what you want to do. And we can see nowadays how much we are under the constraints within this capitalist society. The constraints, except for a few highly privileged people, and I may be one of them who can decide on what kind of activities I can do, but you have the constraint to accept a job where you may be suffering because the job is precarious, the job is physically, psychologically difficult, and also for even the most privileged people with a job, this job may be unmeaningful, what David Graeber calls bullshit jobs, or even more, and there are a lot of converging surveys about that more and more. Even for the most privileged people with great diplomas and so on, having a high position like in corporation and so on, you may even end up in a type of position where in your daily life, you have to implement, take decision, push people to do things which are going in your own ethics. You end up working for marketing and fall down into a manipulative type of tools to develop advertisement to make the people desire toxic products. You know very well it's something you don't have to do, but you need your job to survive. You may end up in the military industrial complex, you may end up in a packaging. So a lot of work when consciously people are suffering in their job, but they cannot quit it because they have a loan and so on. So it was really the third one connected to democracy, this capacity to move out in our society of this centrality of employment, forced employment, which may be for a minority emancipatory employment, but for a very large part of the society, less and less emancipatory and sometimes toxic, depressing type of employment. So that was the three dimension what we like in unconditional basic income, and even more, but the key one, fight against inequalities and not abandon anybody within the society, re-empower the people, giving them a sign of recognition that they are part of the communities who should participate in democracy and so on, and to be autonomous toward how they invest their time, their skills, their will to do the things and so on, and not to be alienated to this capitalist model of society and have to accept unmeaningful employment. I could add more points like about caring economy, that basic income will give a recognition for all the hidden tasks you may find in the society, and keep on going on these Degrowth radical critiques to employment within our society. We have in French, I don't know if you have it in your own cultures, I see names with, it looks like a diversity of cultures and citizenships. In France, we always say that every work deserves a salary. But when you scrutinize more precisely, it turned out to be much more complex. So first, among a lot of other surveys, you have the one made by the, I forgot the name. So you have a lot of surveys showing that more and more, your salary is exactly in the opposite to how much you contribute to the quality of life or the basic needs of the people. So you can all observe that in general, the more you get money. So the more you get money, the more your work will be toxic to the common interest. And the less you get money, the more your work may be important for the common interest. And what I wanted to say as well, with this sentence that every work task deserves a salary, when you scrutinize that the large majority of the most important tasks which are daily made in our society are not paid, are out of this logic of capitalism, out of this logic of this society where things are commodified. And I mostly speak about care work, which is enormous, mostly, unfortunately, still, even if some time-to-time improvement, mostly made by women. So it even reinforces the gender inequalities and so on. And unconditional basic income could be not totally satisfactory to compensate a bit with very radical inequality, and be an opportunity to put an emphasis of the most important tasks which are not considered by this capitalist system. So as I said, this is a positive point, and I could continue for a very long time, but I have a limited time, which fits with degrowth principle, and degrowth means to go out of this toxic growth model of society and to go to a much more emancipatory, sustainable, convivial model of society. We had some concerns and some criticism with unconditional basic income. The first one, as degrowth is mostly about decommodifying our societies, mostly moving out of capitalism, because we really believe that capitalism needs growth. So to move out of growth, you need to question capitalism. In this capitalist model of society, totally depending on economic growth, to reduce growth is a tragedy, because a growth model of society without growth is ending up into recession, depression, massive unemployment, rising inequalities, frustration, and so on. So you have to consider this question on how to redesign the economic rules and so on, and mostly not only to re-embed the economy, but to decommodify the model of society. And there is a risk if you don't think about unconditional basic income in a decommodified way and in a creative way, to participate in even more reinforcing capitalism, in commodifying even more some minimums and so on. Also, you could fall down into the trap of neoliberal or even libertarian approach of unconditional basic income. I don't develop more, but we can come back if you want on the conversation. You could fall down in the trap of you implement unconditional basic income, and if you're not well prepared with the political agenda and other re-embedment of the economy, or reappropriation of the economic tools and so on, the day after you implement unconditional basic income, you face a type of inflation where it doesn't change much. It's just like things, all the prices are going up, but people still rely on their bushy job and so on. I had the third one in mind, but maybe it's not, I forgot about it, so it was maybe not the most important. And we saw that it's highly important to be creative and to connect. Yeah, the third one is about unconditional basic services and the question of social services. We are in society where inequalities are not only about money, but are also about representation, imaginaries, about territories, about education, about access to health, access to care services, access to transport, and so on. So it has to be taken into consideration. So to provide money to people equally may have unequal consequences, approaches. For maybe more well-connected people with a high cultural, social capital, it may be highly emancipatory. For people in other conditions, in other territories, much less wealthy with lower social cultural capital, it may be something which doesn't help them as much as the other one. It may, I mean, some studies are showing that usually it has good impact, but you have to be careful and so on. And it shouldn't be a pretext to dismantle even more social services, which are highly fundamental. And on the contrary, it should be associated with a very careful approach about unconditional basic services. So to re-question health, to re-question education, to re-question transport, to re-question a lot of very fundamental things within our society, which is connected to what we call extension of the free access of all the basic needs what we have, and a political construction about free access. It's something which have to be co-constructed based on deliberation. I will come back on that. So putting all of that together, and also driven by three steps, and I'm back to the first one I already precised before, that and this approach and a degrowth project, including unconditional basic income, should be about re-empowerment, should be about democracy. So we saw that it's very highly interesting to connect it with the idea of local solidarities, because democracy on the logic of subsidiarity works pretty well locally, and to connect it with local alternative economic system, which could be like a local currency, which could be a time bank, which could be about bar type of economic model, which could be about creating commons, and so on. Universal basic services, as I said before, free access to a lot of things and so on. And a key question about what are really our basic needs and how to fulfill them through the re-implementation of public deliberation, defining what are our basic needs and how to fulfill them. And I think this approach should be a great opportunity to revive democracy. And when you read about the surveys, nowadays, wherever you are in the world, and we have a battery of surveys, in particular in France, which are very highly impressive, large majorities of people are willing to move out of the growth model of society under two main conditions. The first one, that it's done fairly, so unconditional basic income provides from not abandoning anybody this fairly dimension, and it has to be democratic. And to be democratic, I think it has to be followed by a large diversity of new democratic tools, which could be citizen conventions, which could be public deliberation, defining what are really our basic income towards the level of sustainability which are acceptable. So that was the first point about re-empowering democracy. The second point was about, and it's connected to this principle of it has to be fairly implemented. It was about degrowth in inequality. We really believe that something like unconditional basic income can only be implemented if we question the exponentially increasing and unbearable, and we never reach such a high level of inequality in our society that we are facing right now. It has to be going through a very strong redistribution. First, in income, so we need to have to open the debate of maximum income. We spoke about acceptable maximum income, but unfortunately, it's not enough, because we can see that nowadays inequalities are not only coming anymore from large inequalities in incomes, they are coming mostly on accumulation of wealth. So it goes through redistribution of wealth from the richest to the poorest, from the private appropriation through corporation toward the new types of property around the concept of the commons. So I think it should be a great opportunity to open the debate of the commons and to experiment new ways to share the spaces, the tools, the know-hows, the machines, the networks, etc. It's highly important because first, from a degrowth perspective, the way of life of the richest is neither sustainable nor shareable. Not the whole civilization, 8 billion people on this planet cannot have the same way of life than Mr. Elon Musk or this type of person. So this person has to go back, like everybody, under the sustainability level toward the 9 environmental boundaries. But it's even more important because of symbolic reasons in terms of imaginary. Nowadays, the way of life of the richest are used everywhere on social medias, on the mainstream medias, to colonize the imaginaries that to have a successful life, you have to live like a very rich YouTube influencer in Dubai. So it has a strong impact on our imaginaries and so on. And as we are social animals comparing to each other, till you have this type of rich people whose way of life is promoted with a lot of lies as an objective in its own to have a successful life, you still in contradiction that we have to slow down, we have to reduce our consumerism toward a society of frugal abundance and so on. But on the contrary, you see that to be successful, and what advertisement is putting in your head every day, to be successful, you also have to follow this highly consumerist, ostentatious way of life. So here's a strong contradiction which have to be addressed. But even worse, and again, back to democracy, this question of inequalities has a very strong negative impact on our democracies. As I said, large majorities are emerging all around the world toward a degrowth political agenda. But as a few people among this oligarchy and few people working for them, whose imaginary is totally in the growth political agenda, are controlling the communication channels through the medias, through the social networks, they impose their own political agenda and don't offer the right platform for public deliberation around degrowth, around political degrowth agenda, etc., etc. Also, you have converging surveys that for a few decades, the richer you are, the higher is your chance to win an election. So it's not in our social democracies, it's not liberal democracies. We can see that we are facing very dysfunctional situation. Also, unfortunately, a lot of money are put on the table, not decided by the world communities who will be impacted on how do we invest that money, but is decided by a minority who have the control on that money. For example, they will decide to develop even more airports. They will decide to invest in this type of research on transhumanism or going to another planet after we destroyed everything on the one we are living in right now and so on. Well, this debate should be open and we could decide to invest this money, which means money, it means collective intelligence, common effort, time, energy. We could decide to do it differently on something else, on low tech, on care economy, on the commons, on the alternative democratic system, on agroecology and so on. So to question inequalities is also to re-question a fair democratic dynamics within our society. Last but not least, connected to the question of unconditional basic income, was a question on how to re-embed the economy. Now we have central banks which are not democratically governed, which are not transparent. To implement unconditional basic income would, and to do it smartly, would require to open this debate. What is a central bank? What is its role? What kind of governance do you have behind? what is money creation, how is it implemented, for what kind of purposes, what kind of regulation dynamics do you have in your bank and finance system, which are all conditions what we don't have at this stage. Again, with the type of economic system we are right now, to implement unconditional basic income may very likely be totally useless, because it will be directly followed by inflation and a rebalance within the system if we don't have the democratic control on that. So unconditional basic income should be associated with democratic reappropriation of central banks, maybe to close some of them, maybe to rethink our currency system toward decommodification, invent new type of currencies with a large diversity of much more democratic governances and so on, will mean to implement type of public audits through citizen convention to question debt. Nowadays, public debts are used as a big brake, not to implement policies and even more social policies, transformation or investment in things which may make sense. And to reappropriate this tool could be fantastic to finance unconditional basic income, maybe through money creation, maybe it's even not needed. So the debate has to be explored, has to be scrutinized and deliberated. Also, the question of private debts, which are now much above than public debts, and through type of public audits, citizen convention auditing private debt could be making a type of audit how these debts have been accumulated, how wealth has been accumulated, based on what kind of unpaid externalities, based on what kind of sometimes creepy dynamics and so on, how we can fairly decide on redistribution of wealth, can we decide on how to reappropriate for the society what we need to really implement these basics for all, and implement a new model of society based on new principles as Degrowth is asking for. So we put all together all these tools, and we arrived to a central proposal around the idea of unconditional autonomy allowance. You find again, like unconditional basic income, the logic of unconditional. So it will be the same principle than unconditional basic income. It will be unconditional, no conditionality to make any kind of employment or this type of things. It will be as well based on individual. So every citizen within the society would have the right to have access to this allowance. It will be enough, and that's the key part of FIX. It should be enough to have a decent life for all, so to really fulfill all the basic needs through public deliberation, again, of what are really our basic needs in a sustainable way. And you have a central concept, what you would find in Degrowth, around autonomy, which refer to Cornelius Castoriadis, the French-Greek philosopher, about how to be really a free, active, empowered citizen who have all the capabilities to self-implement individually and collectively its own rule to live together in a sustainable and a convivial and democratic way. So allowance, it's not an income, because the idea is not to have something which would be mostly or totally like a income in cash, in the currency what we are using where we are, but something which could be much more diverse and as decommodified as possible. So in this unconditional autonomy allowance, you will find some free access to basic needs like square meter to have a decent accommodation, square meter to have access to spaces for meaningful activities, which could be agriculture, which could be a dance club, which could be a sewing club, which could be just to play cards or whatsoever. Some kilowatt-hour to have access to the minimum energy, what you need to have a decent life, some liter of water, some access to food, which could be given, for example, with a local currency around the network of sustainable local agricultural economic system and supply chain. Free access to public services, I think it's highly fundamental. Health, education, transport. But for all what I'm talking about here with the free access, it's something, and it's really in the heart of the unconditional autonomy allowance principles. It's something where the most important is not to implement the most perfect economic social tool, but that's all the process, democratic process, what you may be constructing in the territories to question what is the number of liters of water I will need, and how with the citizen we open this question and how to fulfill it. And to why doing so, to empower the people, to responsibilize the people, to educate the people about what is water, how does it work, why is it so important, why shouldn't we waste water, why do we need water, and how much do we need water for all in a sustainable way, and how do we organize this water system in this way. The same, just to be quick with the health system. If it's to give a free access in sick civilization as we are, with all the civilization disease which are creating based on a wrong way of life, through stress, through pollution, through a very risky way of life, and so on. And to give free access to reinforce the profit of the pharmaceutical lobby. Why going on junk food? It wouldn't make sense. So it's a great pretext or opportunity to question free access of health for all, to question what is a healthy society, and to go back to the essence of health, which should be your medicine, should be your food. So the idea is really, and that's where is a Degrowth political project. It's like everybody has a free access to a high quality health system, but much less people will need health services, because a healthy system is a system not where what is the objective nowadays of a director of hospital, you optimize the occupation of the beds in the hospital and the services you sell, but a healthy society, it's a society where hospitals are empty. So I'm a bit provocating, but that's the logic behind. And the same with education. What kind of education do we want to implement? Education for what kind of purposes? Is it still a type of educational system that we have right now in the end of corporation to create docile workers and able without thinking to achieve a meaningful task, or sometimes toxic tasks and so on? Or do we want to have empowered citizens able to have a very large scale of set of skills, which could be manual, which could be intellectual, again, to be autonomous? And that's really the idea behind this unconditional autonomy allowance. And you may find a lot of other type of public services, like free access to fair information. We can see nowadays how some oligarchs with a right-wing political agenda, far right-wing, are over-occupying, buying these mediatical spheres, the question of social networks and so on and so on. So going to my conclusion, and I hope I was not too long in this short introduction. And again, I apologize for being very quick and to raise a lot of topics and so on. The idea behind degrowth and unconditional basic income, it's really how we can reappropriate all economic tools, and we all know all the benefits of that tools. We know also some pitfalls you may find in these tools, so-called unconditional basic income, how it can be associated with other principles, question what you will find within degrowth, like decommodification, like care work, like social justice, like sustainability, and so on, and how you can associate it with other type of economic tools like maximum income, how to re-embed the economy, like unconditional basic services, to construct a well-elaborated political project moving out in a democratic way out of this growth dependency that we are in, to step by step reach a situation where we fulfill the basic needs for all toward sustainability and conviviality. And to conclude still, you can think about implementation steps toward what I'm speaking about around the unconditional autonomy allowance, and with all this set of proposals that I put around and articulated with. that we could have a first step, which is a very easy one, and all the surveys in Europe are showing a strong interest and support of this idea all around Europe, which could be to work less, to work all. So the first step could be that we first share the working hours based on volunteer ways, that everybody has a right to take a sabbatical every 5 years, everybody has a right to go to their employer and to ask to work with a shorter time and this type of things. And we work less to reappropriate free time to be more active within the society. So it's this really concerns strong approach of degrowth around participation, empowerment, and democracy. Following this step, we can easily implement, and technically, you know it better than me, it's really not a challenge, unconditional basic income to finance it. Our societies in Europe are able to do so, associate this unconditional basic income with maximum income, with all what I spoke about, with how to reappropriate economic tools like central bank, how to question public-private debt, how to question the financial bank system, which is totally crappy and out of control, etc., etc. And then when you have this unconditional basic income, you could, step by step, in a relocalized, decentralized way, decommodify this unconditional basic income. And I will finish with how it could happen with an example. I'm talking to you from Budapest. And for example, in Budapest has been implemented by the city a public management of the water system through public deliberation. People decided on how many liters of water per month everybody gets for free. And then above this cap, the price per liter is radically exponentially increasing. So you don't get any more, let's say, 1,500 euros per month as a basic income, but you get 1,300 or 400 euros per month plus several liters of water for free. Also in Budapest has been implemented a network of urban gardens, highly productive, and a belt of organic agroecological food productions. Around which we implemented a local currency, and you don't get any more 1,400 euros and liters of water, but you get 1,000 euros local currency for local food and 3 liters of water. And you can, based on the local dynamics, based on the local constraints and the context, you can have a very large diversity of implementation, which can start top-down through unconditional basic income, through unconditional basic services, and so on, and enrich more grassrooted transformation within the territories where, in all this process, reinforcing democracy and public deliberation, again, about this key question, what are really our basic needs and how to fulfill them for all in a sustainable, in a fair, in a shareable, and in a convivial way. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much. That was exciting, interesting, inspiring, and yeah, lots and lots of questions that are bubbling up for me and clearly others. So yeah, hat tip to you and appreciate you taking on the very difficult task of trying to make a massive topic succinct, which I think you did very, very well. I see that there's immediately some questions. Vlad, would you like to take the floor and ask these questions, and we can see what Vincent has to say?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. Salut, Vincent. I'm in Toronto. I've been advocating for basic income here in Canada for a number of years. We march on the streets, we petitions politicians, and now the Senate is considering a bill in Canada. So since you're describing UBI as an autonomy allowance, it feels like UBS on one to some extent. We've been programmed to think of UBI as a cash income. And as you described it, it blurs the line between UBI and UBS. I have a question about the aspect that it's in cash as an income. In terms of financing, this is a topic that comes up a lot here. So you can do progressive taxation, and the question is, can it be financed if it's in cash without progressive taxation, and what's the ideal source, considering MMT and Commonwealth dividends that we are discussing here, that does not require growth of GDP and a lot of economic agitation. Because even if you do autonomy allowance, let's say the state, whoever provides services, behind the scenes, there will be movement of finance to pay for those things. And that finance, if it's a sovereign currency, does it require taxation? Is it MMT enough for that? And of course, considering maximum income limits. So that's the number one question and topic of conversation. And number two, since we want to equalize the North-South inequalities, if we do a global UBI, in such way the purchasing power in the South is equalized with the North to raise well-being, how do we control the currency conversions between the North and the South? And how can we regulate for the material footprint that will be kind of a consequence of having a raised purchasing power if you get more income, if it's global, right? So these are the things that I find the most pressing when merging degrowth and UBI or autonomy allowance. And I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Should I answer no, or we take more questions? It's already very rich to
Yeah, I say go for these.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Thanks
please.
a lot, Vlad, for this very fundamental question. So first, I think it's all the dilemma and the contradiction what you have to face in a progressive transition model. And what I offer, it's really like a reformist transition model to move out of capitalism. So in the first step, yeah, you will still have money. That's why in these steps, what I offered as an example, you start with UBI. So with UBI, it means that you will have somehow to get back some cash, which is, you know how it works. It's like to play with where is the cash and where to direct the cash with computers and so on. So it's really like to get back the control on the system, what we don't have anymore. It's out of democratic governance and control, get back the control of central bank, get back the control of money creation. I really believe that we have too much cash in circulation nowadays in our society, which is creating even more pressure on inequalities and so on. We can see everywhere in the Western world the problem around the real estate business. You know, a few can accumulate a lot of cash, and with a salary wherever you are, you will suffer just to get a decent accommodation, just to have a decent life, to go to work and raise your children and so on. So there will be the question, and I think it's part of the process. And that's why I like very much the idea of implementing based on the model of what's happened in France with the Citizen Convention for Climate, where we could say that we will randomly choose, like in Canada, 150 people more or less representing the diversity of Canada, and like a citizen jury. They will have like 6 months, 1 year to listen to experts in economics and so on, and all the diversity of approach of view, and to analyze how the Canadian central bank is working, what kind of governance we could implement, what is money creation, and how it could be used. Do we have too much money in circulation or not? How to reappropriate control on this finance system, which is totally disconnected to any kind of real economic models and so on. And the key question, of course, of public and private debts, where behind debt you have appropriation. I mean, debts could be an investment or could be something problematic. Debt and reimbursed debt is something which may be toxic. I mean, you have type of toxic debt or unfair debt where you pay back money for crappy, even mafia system and so on. Like in France, the level of the public debt, it's only interest what we pay to private bank. Since the middle of the 1970s, France could not loan money anymore directly to the French central bank. So you had the French central bank renting this very low rate money to private bank, and the French state who was renting this money with higher rates, and now we have a public debt, which is this debt. So to question, is it a fair debt to reimburse or not? So it's all this question which has to go through in a way to totally demystify money, currency, which is one of main challenge we have in our society. And it's very interesting when I make some a workshop around this unconditional basic income and so on. Even if I go to the bank sector with professionals, very often they say about the question of money creation, debt, central bank, it's highly technical. It has to be dealt by experts. And it's the big lie we've been living in for years. We've never been educated. And it's quite unbelievable that the central tool, how our societies is organized around, we say that but it's too complicated to look what is behind, so we have to give it to experts, where I think it's one of the most fundamental democratic challenge to reappropriate the know-how, the knowledge, the transparency around that. And moreover, when you start to study it, you realize that it's not so difficult. And we could see with the Citizen Convention for Climate in France, how in 7 weekends, 150 people have been taught about the environmental boundaries and the challenge behind it, ended up with 150 proposals which are much more consistent than all the work made by so-called experts in the last decade in France. So I really believe that this is the way, and to continue the second way in this journey, implementing later unconditional autonomy allowance, starting from grassroots, starting in implementing more and more unconditional basic services, where again, it's not a question of money. So we cannot eat money. I mean, there is this famous sentence from North America and the natives that when all these idiotic Westerners, white European people colonizing them, will have burnt all the trees and emptied all the rivers, you will understand that you cannot eat with money and you cannot drink money. So the question is really to go back to what's behind. When we speak about water, it's not a question of money, it's about the water cycle. It's about water system. It's about water under pressure with what looks like acceleration of climate change. And the same for all the topic. And also in degrowth, there is this debate, and I will quote the title of a recent book of my co-author, Anitra Nelson, Beyond Money. This very fundamental anthropological question, whether maybe money was a mistake, and to go back to a gift economy, to go back to what you always had and what is still dominating, but as a mindset is still money. There is this Mark Twain sentence: if you have a hammer in your head, you see all the problem looking like nails. And the hammer we have, it's really currency, it's money and so on. You know, you even speak about climate change and they will say how much it will cost. No, it's not how much it will cost. The question is that our children, grandchildren, will they be able to live on this planet? So it's really like to move out of money in terms of imaginary. It's I think a very fundamental question. And I really believe that going more and more through these democratic deliberation dynamics in the territories around unconditional autonomy allowance, around social justice, around a lot of other principles and so on, money won't be the topic at all anymore. The topic will be how to produce enough food for all, with what kind of agriculture, not destroying the soil, but absorbing CO2, but with the right varieties, sharing the work and so on. So you go into another type of qualitative complexity, and not anymore with blinding money economicist idiotism, which put us in the self-destructive situation where we are right now. The second point is even more important, and it's in the art since the beginning of the degrowth movement about Global South. As a reminder, I could not introduce anything about degrowth, but I very often and know as degrowth is growing very quickly in a new environment, internationally, Anglo-Saxon world, academic world, and so on, we forgot some of the fundamental pillars of degrowth, where I really believe that the first international degrowth conference took place in 2002 in Paris, in UNESCO. It was a large conference organized mostly by people coming from Global South and Westerners who spend time in Global South, a lot of anthropologists and so on. And the title of the conference is saying us a lot: deconstruct development, rebuild the world. And it was a radical critiques to development. Development understood as imperialistic, cultural and economic tools, which was unfairly used to perpetuate a post-colonial system. So behind degrowth, you have all these questions, but they also brought a lot of very interesting questions where I really believe that they are more accurate and important now than they were already in 2002. That our model of civilization coming from the global north imposed on the rest of the planet, unfairly perpetuating a post-colonial model of civilization, is also not functioning in terms of well-being. The level of consumerism, the level of over-destruction, what we have in global north, is far away to be followed by a high level of well-being. We are not only over-consuming, stealing resources from other parts of the planet, doing so, having a terrible political interference, cultural interference. What Aminata Traoré, former minister of Mali, minister of culture of Mali, called the rape of imaginary. That we are not only imposing imperialistically a model of society, destroying the planet, exploiting a large part of the people on this planet, and so on. It's simply not functioning. Just look at what's happening nowadays in the United States. It is culturally a totally collapsing civilization with just one example, the loneliness. And all this debate is also to, of course, repair this colonial debt, what we have, this environmental debt, what we have to global south, and also to be humble. Finally, the Western white male has to be humble and self-critics, and to go back to listen to them. Because when you will find still alive thousands of other civilizations who've been living for a much longer time than ours, which in 150 years managed to jeopardize the survival of our Homo sapiens alive species on this planet. But we could do that in harmony with the environment and so on. I think we may be smart to be humble and to go to listen to them as well. And again, unconditional autonomy are allowance, and it's an emergency toward a political degrowth agenda in global north, because where we have to decrease our level of over-consumerism, it's where we are over-consuming, is a fundamental step for global south. And it is back to this 2002 conference with the radical critiques to development I mentioned, for the global south to reappropriate their self-determination. Because if we keep on going in this fake green growth and so on, we will have to colonize even more region, cultures, to get even more materials that you need to construct the electric cars and to make this fake green technology transition and so on. So both are totally interconnected. And while you implement this deliberation in territories about basic needs, it has to be articulated that, our basic needs is all from a 10-year-old have a smartphone in the pocket, but let's see, is it something sustainable? But to make the smartphone, you need cobalt. Where is the cobalt constructed? In Congo. By who? In what kind of condition? If we do it fairly, let's open cobalt mines in our cities and make our children work in that cobalt mines. So suddenly we will realize that maybe to all have a smartphone, what you renew every 2 years from 10-year-old till you die, it's maybe not such a basic need articulated to these things. And it's really the key point of that. And I think all of this has to be made in conversation with Global South, in reparation, and also in listening to them, and we have a lot to learn. I hope I answered both your questions, Vlad.
Excellent.
And sorry, I was maybe too long, but it was very important, complex topics. But
not at all.
I will try to do it shorter later.
Not at all. Complex topics, very important and very large questions. So thank you very much. Filippo, over to you.
Yeah, Vincent, thank you very much for the inspiring talk. I'm a PhD student working on basic income trials and the evaluation of their effects. I think you already hinted at your answer probably, but I was trying to reason on this topic of decommodification. I also found very interesting your idea of an unconditional allowance. But I was just thinking that what if basic income was actually a tool in the process? So it would clearly be it's not that straightforward to imagine what would happen if a basic income was actually implemented at a national level in some countries or even at a global level. But don't you think that could be a tool, intermediate step that could trigger indeed the commodification process, which would ultimately maybe lead to a profoundly different economic system?
Yeah, I will make a short answer because I think I already addressed a bit that. Yeah, I think it could definitely be a very powerful, effective tool under a lot of conditions. In which context, political context and narrative, do you implement it? And what I suggest with unconditional autonomy allowance is something which will require more time. It's really to transform the imaginaries, the democracy, to relocalize our productions, to relocalize our and invent a new decommodify economic models and so on. UBI, it's a political will, can be implemented within an hour. I mean, our public institution can do it very easily. And again, you have to be very highly tricky. An example I didn't quote, and I never understood why the Social Democrats have never thought about unconditional basic income as a fantastic tool for growth model of society. You implement unconditional basic income, and then people can consume, can make even more consuming loans to consume even more, and doing so, you relaunch growth. You create more production, you create more economic activity, and so on. And one point I didn't address yet, which is one of the key pillars also of degrowth. I think if, for example, you don't, and it's what's happened in France, it's very interesting. I will mention this example. If you don't question the role of advertisement marketing, and even more know how it's everywhere in a very, very subtle way in the social networks. If you think about the role of influencers on Instagram and so on, and how they colonize the imaginary, in particular of the teenagers, the youngers, and so on. So if you implement unconditional basic income without questioning that, and without implementing radical regulation of marketing, advertisement, and so on, you may end up in a type of contradiction between you implement unconditional basic income for re-empowering the people, questioning work, getting more free time to participate in a transition toward degrowth, and in the same time, you still have this strong pillar of colonization of imaginaries, pushing you to consume always more. It's what happened in France, where in the beginning of the 2000s, and it was very interesting, a socialist government implemented the 35 hours for all. And they said, you will see, you will work less, you will earn less, but you will have more time for your activities, your hobbies, you will be less stressed, you will be more effective in your work, you will spend more time with your children, and so on, which worked pretty well. All these things had a very positive impact and so on. But at the next election, it was Nicolas Sarkozy who was elected with a very simple slogan: work more to earn more. Because they forgot about something contradictory, that, yeah, people qualities of life was improved, they have more free time and so on. But in the same time, you still have advertisement everywhere telling them that if you don't consume this last large screen, smartphone, electric car, or whatsoever, you're a loser. So this work less to earn less and have a better life was effective, but it was in contradiction with the key messages which were put on the table. And you may face the same with unconditional basic income. That's why, like any tool, it has to be really smartly articulated within a narrative and a set of articulation. And UBI could be very highly effective and interesting, or devastating if it's badly used.
Definitely, thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you. Any next questions, please? Comments also. excellent because I have a number. I mean, the first thing, just this is not UBI strictly speaking, but I agree with everything you're saying, Vincent, about advertising. And I'm wondering, would you ban advertising? If you had the sort of the God button that you could push, would one of your initial actions be to ban advertising?
So it's again, you have to go into a complex topic. So you have to define what is advertising, what kind of advertising for what. International budget of marketing advertisement. It's more, I don't know the last figure, but it's something that we studied a few years ago, and maybe it increased, but it's more or less roughly this order of magnitude. It's more than 1,000 euros, 1,000 billion euros per year. So it's enormous. And among these advertising, when you say that I want to ban advertising, so immediately you will say, but it's a Pol Pot, it's a dictatorship, it's whatsoever, but you have to scrutinize what is behind. And it turned out that the large majority of this incredible amount of money invested is concentrated around few corporations and sectors, which are usually a type of very highly problematic advertising and so on. And after you will find in minority, but a lot of people are working on that and so on, other type of advertising which are not as toxic, much less toxic. And maybe you have to make a distinction toward all these things. Also in advertising, you have incredibly talented people. Their talent is not only they are highly creative, they have good intuition on how to catch our attention, how to create narratives and so on. And it's a type of knowledge, know-how, which could be useful for democracy. Now this knowledge is unfortunately derouted to manipulate our brains. These people are not only have this type of talent, they are also working with psychologists, social psychologists, who are also incredibly smart. So usually if you want to see where is a society in terms of imaginaries, watch advertisement, because these people are have the biggest amount of money for that. The smartest people to deal with that are the most well informed about what the people have in their mind. They are doing fantastic surveys, which are not public, unfortunately. I have friends working for the sector who time to time can share some of them and so on. And that's why you end up like nowadays to sell you a car, you won't have anymore the type of principles what you will find 1 or 2 decades ago, where 2 decades ago, advertisement for a car were really highly masculinist, virilist, were really about power, control, speed, and also very often very sexist, that if you don't have a car, you don't find a nice partner and so on. Nowadays, the society is not there anymore. To sell you a car, you will see a beautiful family in harmony, with the children sitting in the car, the mom, everybody's happy, in conviviality, in a beautiful road in the mountains, full of biodiversity and so on, and with bikes on the roof of the car because they go biking in the forest. But still, they will use all the principles of degrowth, which are more and more dominating in the society, to sell you exactly the opposite type of products and so on. So I think it would be very fantastic to deroot all this talent, knowledge, know-hows towards something else, not to manipulate the brains as they do in direction of growth for the sake of degrowth, but on the contrary, to have a very good understanding on how narratives, and we are a narrative type of animal, can be constructed and so on, and how these talent and tools could be used to make democracy be more functional and to participate in this transformation. And there, I think we should do, like for everything, it could be very interesting to implement type of citizen convention around it. And when we did it a bit small scale last year for a large conference in Sciences Po Paris last year, the dynamic within the Degrowth France, and I was one of the co-presidents of this small working group, the dynamics was, yeah, it's obvious we should ban. advertisement and marketing and so on. And then we got two main surprises. The first one was that the historic adbuster movements were not on this agenda. They have something much more complex. So you have to make this distinction and so on. And also we saw big enthusiasm among the people working within this sector, who somehow want to save also their skin, want to save themselves, but who were really enthusiastic to open this debate with us under the condition that we go a bit further in the conversation. And then we ended up with a very large scale of proposals, which were, of course, to strongly regulate the one which are obviously lying, manipulating, and pushing for things which are sustainably unfair and so on. But also a very large set of questions which were very interesting. Like, for example, it turned out that if you simply ban advertisement now, most of the medias, and among them the best one, will go to bankruptcy immediately because they were so stupid that they constructed a type of economic model where the main income is coming from advertisement. So it has to be associated with a smart approach on how to finance them, free media. And it's just one example on how, when we made this process, you go into a complexity, and then you end up with a much broader approach, which is not this binary approach. Let's ban it, and of course we have to ban some of them and so on, but how to make this transformation, and also how to work together with a part of the sector where you may find very terrible, cynical people, but also a lot of people who are suffering because they are talented and they have to use their talent for something where they know very well which is the wrong way at this stage, and who could be useful to do something else.
Makes absolute sense, and fundamentally underlines the complexity of the socio-ecological problems that we face. Also points to the utility or potential utility of basic income, not as a necessarily end state policy, but as a transition policy, as something that supports survival and the reorganization of production and energy through the period of transition. I have lots more questions, but again, want to just check if there's anyone else that would like to ask, because I don't want to overly abuse my position as chair. I will continue to abuse my position as chair then. One of the there's two pieces, two places I'd like to go here. I think probably thinking big picture in the way that we have just been doing. I just want to ask you to say a little bit more about the articulation between sort of degrowth, basic income, and then maximum income and redistribution of wealth. I'm sure you're aware Ingrid Robbins has just written a very provocative book about sort of the limits to sufficiency and limits to wealth. And there's a long and established philosophical tradition around sufficiency and how we need to place upper limits in order to make minimal basic minimums viable for everybody, which necessarily brings us into the terrain of political contestation and questions around use of force, around redistribution. So just talk us through a little bit of your understanding of the intersections between degrowth, maximum income, and then critically redistribution of concentrated wealth.
Yes, so Vlad is asking the name of the book. Could you maybe repeat the name of the book?
I think it's called, hang on, let me just Google it again now. I think it's called, her work is on sufficientarianism.
Yeah.
And her latest book is, which is very, very, very decent.
When you look for it, I can start to answer. Yeah. So actually, in this concept of sufficiency emerged, and is now quite in the debate after it was, I think, first mentioned by IPCC report. I mean, it was of course mentioned by a lot of others before, but IPCC put it back quite strongly in the center of the political discussions. In French, we speak more about sobriety, and very often there is this debate and this question about sobriety. Isn't it something different already than sufficiency. So you have a concepts which are different. If I understood well, in the Anglo-Saxon world, sobriety, you add this word with the same meaning, more like broad meaning, a type of philosophy about to be free, to be well, you have to self-implement limits, which was in the heart of most of the civilization in the past. But after the Industrial Revolution, sobriety became highly limited to the question of alcoholism and so on. So now we are around sufficiency. And to be honest, even if I wrote a book 1 year ago on sobriety, which was a comment from my publisher, because President Macron started to overuse the question of sobriety. But it's funny because they say that sobriety doesn't mean degrowth. You can have sobriety and growth. And it's a bit, unfortunately, type of vague concept, which has been very highly distorted and can be even more distorted, in particular sufficiency, where with Anitra Nelson and the degrowth movement, we would rather speak about frugal abundance. And sufficiency for a US person nowadays, considering how the way of life is organized, the mindset is organized, the mass medias are promoting and so on, may unlikely end up with something sustainable. And that's why when you question sufficiency, and that's why I like very much this provocative slogan of frugal abundance, you have to question dynamically your expectation and what is realistic. And it's the example I took before with a mobile phone. From this perspective, we also speak about open relocalization. We have to relocalize as much as possible our productions, because first, it's totally absurd to make everything travel all around the world as we do. You know, a yogurt nowadays makes thousands of kilometers if you take all the components you may find in it and so on. Where when I was still a child in the countryside in France, in my grandparents, during the holidays, the yogurt was the strawberries from the garden and the yogurt from the cooperative of the village. And in a few decades, you constructed this type of things, and also it's very weak. We could see in time of COVID when borders closed down because of the pandemics or because of the war or because there is a boat block in the Suez Canal and so on. We can see that we have a type of supply chains which are highly powerful, but highly fragile. So you end up then, a boat is blocked in the Suez Canal, and in Europe, you don't have medicine anymore, and we are unable to produce basic aspirin and this type of thing. So you have to relocalize as much as possible what to produce for all these energetic, environmental, serenity reasons, but also in even more to reappropriate the consciousness of what's behind. Because now when we speak about sufficiency, I think we don't really understand, and we don't put this question behind, like behind this freedom, this illusion of freedom of consuming everything as we do daily, there is a very expansive environmental and social price. If we go to a type of frugal abundance, relocalizing our production, suddenly we will have to face the reality of what we will put behind sufficiency. And it's the same with maximum income. I mean, this debate has to be an opportunity to question the way of life of the richest, and we are among the richest. I mean, some of us from Global South and so on, because it's institutionally implemented. So we have to go into this in-depth conversation, experimentation, and so on. And also, when you go to radical frugal abundance, what I had the opportunity to do in certain parts of my life with our cooperative here in Cargonomia, when you do it together, when you invent new narrative, new imaginaries, and we do it mostly toward food and transport with cargo bikes and so on, where our environmental, metal, resource footprint is very low toward that. And with type of agriculture we can implement, it's even the contrary. We are regenerating the biodiversity, we are absorbing CO2 and so on. You can have a life which is even more better with hardly nothing. but it's to bring this question in a bourgeois way of sufficiency, I'm afraid may end up into a friction, contradiction, and not satisfactory answer. And that's why you have to find type of concepts which cannot be distorted and which are also disruptive to the mainstream mindset. I don't know if I'm clear in my questions.
You are very, very clear. Oh, Vlad, excellent. This is I don't know if anyone can read here. Vlad is pointing out that he's going to transitioning to a degrowth future, naive or revolutionary. Vlad, that sounds highly relevant. I suggest you post the link here in case anyone wants to head to that seminar after this seminar, because the link between one and the other is very clear. Last question, and then I'll allow us to finish early for those that jump off. Just strategically, you know, there's like everything you say makes intuitive as well as scientific sense, Vincent, and at the same time, entrenched power interests very clearly are likely to stand in opposition to this. What role for strategy? Like, what role for the state and working through, around, over, against? Please just say a few words on pathways, if you will, before we wrap up.
Yeah, so 2 points in that. The first one is that we are facing a very interesting situation where we reach a type of cultural hegemony. Majorities of people on this planet, majorities of people in particular in Europe, in the Western world in particular, in Europe, in France, we have a series, a very large diversity of a set of surveys confirming that majority of people understand first that this model of society we are living in with growth is unsustainable from an environmental point of view, but also from a human point of view. People start to be more and more exhausted with that way of life, with stress, with always more, with a dependency on technologies and bureaucracy and this type of thing. We are collapsing civilization environmentally and culturally, anthropologically, and people more and more understand that. People are willing to radically change under both the condition I already said. It's fairly implemented, so everybody has to play his own partition, and it's democratic to reinvent more deliberative, direct democracies and so on. So you find that in very strong dynamics everywhere, but in the same time, people feel exhausted and feel that they are totally the country of empowered. I don't know if you have a word in English. They are totally like
Disempowered.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And then you have an oligarchy, which is in terms of how many humans on this planet are in the growth political agenda, with a group of bureaucrats, technocrats, well-educated people, and so on, who still believe. And I really use the word believe because it was very interesting. I have it in the introduction of my last book on sobriety. All the government leaders in France spoke recently, and they almost do it daily, against degrowth, but they do it in a way that I do not believe in degrowth. I want to believe in growth. And it's even not I believe in growth, it's I want to believe in growth. So you are a type of religion, type of spiritual, I don't know, mania and believe in growth for growth, which is not something which is well argumented, constructed criticism to degrowth. And it's one of the problems we face. We are usually never criticized based on arguments, but we are rejected, demonized by these people based on beliefs. And I think for degrowth, the key point, it's considering these dynamics. On one hand, we are much more people willing to move, but we feel like we don't have the right tools to do it. We don't know how to do it, and so on. And moreover, most of that people think they are isolated. We think that we are in minority when we start to question the system and so on, what the surveys are showing, which is not wrong. And on the other hand, you have a very powerful minority of people, and so powerful that they control the media, they control the social networks, they control the public institutions, they control where you put advertisement, marketing, where you put the money for research, and so on and so on. And I think for degrowth, the key question is how to create another type of power balance within the society. How to push for imposing the key question in the public debate, in the democratic sphere, and so on. And somehow there are spaces where we are relatively winning. If you look, for example, in municipal elections or in the level of the territories, there are very interesting dynamics in the last year everywhere around citizen dynamics, around alternative ways to run for a municipality election, around the creativity and the implementation of local deliberation, of a public budget, which may be deliberated by a group of citizens. So you have a lot of very interesting things happening. You may find interesting steps in within corporation or public institution as well, where people are pushing with a lot of contradictions and a lot of difficulties, are sincerely trying to push within these institutions, this corporation, to question that and to invent. So you may find some corporation who are making very small steps, which are usually only used for greenwashing toward new economic models about reusing, recycling, renting and not overproducing, and etc., put in commons. So there are interesting dynamics which are far away from being enough. You have all these fantastic dynamic around the civil society, where everywhere you go all around the world, in every territories, you will find group of citizens who are full of creativity, sometimes suffering, but happy, trying to find niche ways to produce, share, take decision differently. You will find that around CSA, you will find that around transition initiatives, you will find that around do it yourself, do it together, repair workshop, etc., etc. So everywhere you will find all these preconditions for what could be a degrowth model of society and so on. But again, this is not enough. So the key question is how we manage to implement another power balance, where we can see that most of our societies are imploding from inside, including, I believe, China, United States, France, where the level of hate speech and violence in public sphere is rising, where on the contrary, we've never been in societies which are so much open-minded. So the political agenda of the far right is everywhere in the public debates, where our societies are really inclusive, open-minded, not enough, but more than ever, and so on. So also here you have this contradiction, and you have something which is in a frightening way back to the political agenda. It's escalation of war. So it's for degrowth and all the associated friends, partners, movements, and so on, how to push to implement the right questions, which will solve all the problems that we face. Again, this oligarchy was unable to accept, to think, and to move out of their growth religion, because this growth model of society is serving directly their own interest. And I would say, on one hand, I am highly optimistic, because all the solutions are more or less already there, experimented daily by a large diversity of people, with some difficulties, some success stories, some failures, some beautiful enjoyment of life, and so on. This is life. And on the contrary, I'm terribly pessimistic, because the power level is not in our advantage at this stage. And there is really an acceleration of the self-destruction of our societies, democracies, acceleration of climate change, and so on. So we are a bit in between, and let's push for better days as much as we can.
Thank you very much. A very balanced way to conclude, with plenty of hope in there. Vincent, thank you very much.
Thank you for your invitation.
It was a genuine pleasure. Thank you for taking up the invitation, and everybody, thank you for with us. We will have this on YouTube soon, and we will look forward to being in touch again shortly. Vincent, see you next week. Thanks all.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
Yes.